me hit record. We have lots of people here now. Welcome everybody. As you know, today you're not going to be hearing from me because you'll be hearing a lot from me tomorrow. Tomorrow we have the Get Unstuck call, but today we have the amazing Brian King with the epic background, who is going to be talking to us about how to serve your neurodivergent clients better. Every time I say the word serve, my mind is very dirty. Anyway, so I'm gonna let Brian introduce himself, and then he's gonna walk us through apparently a very engaging training that I'm very excited for. So Brian, the stage is yours, my darling.
Thank you, my dear friend. Hello, everyone. I know some of the faces here. Some of you I don't, which is good because now we can get to be new friends. My background is very colorful. I grew up with undiagnosed, you don't have to be able to spell all these terms, undiagnosed autism spectrum challenges, ADHD, dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia. So autism spectrum, I think there's enough out there in the ether that you have a good sense of that. ADHD. There are 11 flavors of dyslexia. A lot more than that when you consider the individual differences and nuances between each person. Dyscalculia is often referred to as dyslexia for math. So I have a great deal of difficulty remembering orders of operations. I really cannot do simple math in my head. I need to use my fingers or a calculator. And it's very difficult. I can manage the bills okay, but if you ask me to do anything in real time, I freeze. The dysgraphia refers to poor fine motor control when it comes to writing. So my writing is very strenuous. It hurts to write. So being in the age of being able to type and voice into text is dynamite. One thing I say is that this is a great time to be disabled because of all the tech that has come forth to allow us to circumvent the gaps in our skills that make it difficult for us to engage. So a lot of what I'm going to be sharing is a combination of tech hacks, understanding the gaps in the neurodivergent mind, and how to cleverly circumvent those so that they don't get in the way or get in the middle of what you're trying to communicate and a neurodivergent person's ability to receive it. Because when you have all of these different challenges that I do, processing information becomes extremely difficult. Whether it's spoken, written, visually communicated. In fact, one thing that's common, and people are beginning to make this discovery, is the value of watching a program while having the subtitles on. Anybody else found this to be a eureka for themselves? No one? I'm going to need hands here because I don't do really the nonverbal very well with the face. Okay. One of the reasons why that is because the rhythms of the nervous system are out of sync in someone who has neurodivergence. So it's typically the circadian rhythm, sleep problems, the ability to understand time or feel time, modulating their own feelings and their own stress response. There tends to be a lot of ebb and flow, and these experiences are very dynamic as opposed to stable. You know, people tend to have a homeostasis or a calm state that they kind of exist in. Calm is something that people with neurodivergence have to work for because our default setting is anxious. Anybody can relate to that? Okay, because our nervous system is wired for threat detection. It assumes most everything is a threat until proven otherwise, and it demands a lot of proof. So there's a lot of things that go into helping a person calm down so that what you're communicating seems to be other than a threat, because any risk can be perceived as threatening because any uncomfortable step is initially perceived as a threat. So when you're talking about taking somebody outside their comfort zone, considering new ideas, just the mere act of considering something new is inviting somebody to be threatened or feel threatened in some way. Now, that's just my brain dump to start things off. One thing I want to make sure you all understand about me is I'm not masking right now. And masking is something that people do in general to hide all of the vulnerabilities they don't want you to see. And people with neurodivergence spend the majority of their life being corrected. Don't do this, put that down, do that differently, be more normal, stop being so hyper. So they learn to adopt a persona that will eliminate the criticism and gain them approval and belonging. Problem is, the persona is the one that belongs, not the real person. So one of the things you need to communicate is that there's no persona needed here. That
Can I have
you're
my phone, please, Harry?
Pardon, who, what, huh? Is that the voice in my head or something else? Okay, somebody unmuted for a moment.
Sorry, it's unmuted now. Guys, please
Now,
mute yourselves or I will come with a chainsaw to your house, okay?
now, because of my glitchy brain, I got distracted and I forgot what I was talking about. So who wants to tell me what I just said? Des?
I was paying attention. It was about the persona and how actually, you know, the difference between who you really are and the persona and how it's the persona that, how the fuck did you say it? Oh my God, I forgot what you
It's
said.
the persona that's ultimately the one that's invited to be a part of the
Yes.
group, to belong.
Love.
And if a person needs to maintain a persona the entire time they're working with you, they never demonstrate their actual needs, because those are the things they've been taught are dangerous to show, because they're afraid their vulnerabilities will either be minimized, criticized, or disregarded. Now, oh, you're overreacting, you're making too much of it. You need to calm down already. One of the mainstays of the neurodivergent mind is a tendency for all or nothing thinking. It's all bad or it's all good. It's the best day of my life or it's the worst thing that ever happened to me. You can see language in the way people talk about things. You may even do this yourself, especially when you're anxious. And it's very difficult for people with neurodivergence to appreciate the gray areas. They see goals as having 2 points of reference. It's the beginning and it's the ending. That's one of the reasons for impatience, is because they really have a hard time appreciating the process. They just want things to happen now, happen exactly the way I want them to be. It needs to be perfect, because perfection is an all or nothing category. So when you see people talking like this, it can be really evident that these are people who don't understand how to construct or execute a process. Now, in my case, I have difficulties, well, actually in all cases with somebody who's neurodivergent, I have gaps in what I refer to as executive functions. You heard that term before? Anyone? Executive functions refers to the cognitive abilities that allow you to execute, to take action on a plan, if you can create one. One of the biggest obstacles to me operationalizing anything is oftentimes when a person says, do this step, do this step, do this step, they assume an ability to smoothly transition in between each step. Somebody with executive function issues might not be able to do that. They can need it spelled out so succinctly that it's the equivalent of taking baby steps. In fact, that's one of my mottos, is baby steps, because the closer the wins are for a person who is neurodivergent, the quicker they get a dopamine hit, which reinforces the need to keep taking action because you get a little candy at the end of it, but also because it feels less threatening to take a baby step as opposed to a larger step. You know, how do you bite an elephant? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. The bites need to be really small, almost like tasting it with your tongue or taking a little nibble. When I say tasting it with your tongue, that's giving them enough of the experience so they can feel what it's like without having to commit to it. And language that I use to invite them to do this is I say things like, try this on. as opposed to do this. Do this requires a commitment. If I say, try this on. Imagine how this would feel, but only for a second. So I'm not telling them they need to go all in on it, because if they have all or nothing belief, they think I need to go from comfort to extreme discomfort, to extreme anxiety. They don't know what the process looks like until you show it to them, and show it to them in a visceral way, something that taps into an experience, a physical experience. If I say, try this on, what image comes to mind for you? Anyone? We're not all nudists here, so you must have some point of reference. Shoes. Now, what's the beautiful thing about shoes? When you take them, when you put them on, are they concreted or super glued to your feet for eternity? If it doesn't fit, you can take it off. So try it on I found as a very powerful metaphor for people with neurodivergence, because they get to sample something without having to commit to it, like a new food. Taste this. Tasting it doesn't commit you to having to eat it. So bypassing the all or nothing thinking is really essential, because people will avoid extreme experiences if you doubt your capacity to manage those experiences. Yes, people with neurodivergence tend to underestimate their own resilience, because they'll focus more on how much they don't want to have an experience and forget the fact that they've had those experiences before and have come out the other end just fine. Now, one thing you may have noticed so far is that I kind of jump around a lot. And because of the disorganization of my brain, I tend to experience things as a bunch of scattered photographs or scattered puzzle pieces. And I have to almost talk out loud or write to figure out how those pieces go together, because my brain doesn't normally prioritize well, determine which has the most value, where I should start, and sequencing. What order do they need to go in? Because those two are process-oriented executive functions. My brain does not do process well. Everybody with me so far? I absolutely need questions from you to know what the knowledge gaps are, because I don't want to tell you stuff you already know. You know, I want to speak to your gaps. Now, does anybody here identify as neurodivergent?
Tell us in the chat.
Me, woo. Now, does anybody need clarification on what neurodivergence is? One hand, one is enough. Neurodivergence is the idea that the differences in how our minds work exist on a continuum, that there isn't a thing as normal or abnormal or illness or wellness necessarily. Just like everybody has their own face, their own fingerprint, everybody has their own neurological profile. So the people that came up, or the person rather, that came up with the idea of neurodivergence was really trying to further the idea that we all belong, we all have a place. Just because we're different doesn't mean we're abnormal, because difference is the way of things. Now, if we can only get the medical society on board with this and to stop pathologizing everybody's uniqueness, that would be stellar. So I don't engage too much in discussions of diagnoses, although depending on where the person's at, that may be their point of reference. They only understand themselves according to the label. I'm autistic, I have ADHD, I'm depressed, I'm bipolar. And the I'm there tells you a lot, because it tells you the person believes their diagnosis is part of their identity. One thing I make a point of doing is depersonalizing those experiences. And this is something that helps you break through the defensiveness. Because if you talk about experiencing overwhelm as opposed to being overwhelmed, being overwhelmed is very personal. Experiencing it, you have a little distance from it now. And the more distance they can have from it, the more they can look at it objectively and rationally and realize there might be something different about what I'm doing. But if you say being, they might start to think, I have something wrong with who I am. So the more you depersonalize it, the more accessible they are to you. And anybody who follows me knows that I don't hesitate to be vulnerable. And if you think you know what vulnerable means, trust me, I'm more vulnerable than that. And one of the reasons I do that, one of the main reasons I do that, is because people that are neurodivergent don't trust you because you say, trust me. They don't trust you because of the position you're in. They trust you because you've demonstrated you get it. Because they're so used to being misunderstood that finding somebody that understands them is like finding a shot glass full of water just after you walked across the desert. The need is so extreme for that. And the way you demonstrate you get it is by demonstrating the very thing you are inviting them to share with you. If you're saying you understand what it's like to be afraid, prove it. Share something about you where you were very afraid, how vulnerable you felt when you were that way, and what you did about it. Because a lot of them feel trapped in the way they've always been. Because again, their default setting is anxiety. So they're used to being stressed about just about everything. So you being vulnerable and taking that risk and showing, see, not only am I willing to share this with you, but you can see that I was safe in doing so. The community that I have on Facebook or anywhere else really knows the way that I roll. And they know when I'm vulnerable, your job is to support the one being vulnerable, whether it's me or whether it's somebody in the comments. If you try to take advantage of that, I will boot you faster than you know what happened, because nobody is going to mess with that safe space. Because I know how essential it is for somebody to feel safe in order to let their guards down. Because if it's a difference between I feel safe or I feel in danger, you need to err towards the end of safe. You need to err towards the side of safety so a person can calm down. In fact, one thing I determined, just a little caveat here, I've written 5 books over the years, and one was how to raise kids on the spectrum, because I have 3 boys with autism and ADHD. And my oldest also has dyslexia and bipolar. So the cup runneth over neurodivergently in my family. So what was I saying before I tangented? Des forgot to pay attention on this one, so I need somebody else.
About
Nobody's-
creating a safe space, Brian.
Oh, absolutely. And let me see what I was going to add to that. Oh, there's so many things I could say. I'm watching the time. I want to honor everybody's time as well. One of the ways that I accomplish safety when I work with people is to try and emphasize as much as I can. I'm not 100% with this. Is to demonstrate that there's nothing wrong with where you are. You're not wrong for being stuck. You're not wrong for being clumsy. You're not wrong for needing a minute to think before you respond. Now, I don't know how the schools are in the rest of the world, but in the US, the smartest one was the one with the quickest answer. Anybody else experience that? What if your brain does not operate well in real time? What if your processing is slow and you need a minute? But needing a minute is responded to as though you are not prepared, you don't care, you didn't do the work, or you're hiding something. Anybody who hesitates is thinking of a lie. No, maybe somebody who hesitates is trying to wait for their brain to catch up to all the information you gave them, make meaning of it, turn it into the language that they need to say it in, then remember it long enough to get it out. Many people with neurodivergence need to concentrate to go through that process. It's not automatic. One of my biggest Achilles heels or glitches is my working memory. Working memory is the part of your brain that allows you to remember what you know long enough to use it. So if you know how to change a light bulb, in order to do that, you need to remember the process for changing a light bulb and remember that process while you're using the process. When you have working memory issues, it's usually I can remember it or I can do it, but I can't do both. So in my case, I need to have written instructions all the time. I look at step 1, do it. Step 2, do it. Step 3, do it. Because there's such a limited capacity. So let's say you're doing a video and you're firing off all these steps. First do this, then do that. A person with neurodivergence will likely shut down once it occurs to them, there's no way I'm gonna remember this, so why bother? But if it's written out explicitly and you also discuss process, this is how you do step 1. This is how you do step 3. Now you have given me not only the first stepping stone and the last stepping stone, you've given to me all of the steps in between. So I can see it. I know what the next step is going to look like, the step after that. It's far less daunting when I can see the trail. In fact, I do great when somebody gives me the process. I can't do jack if you ask me to also create the process, because my brain just doesn't do that. Now, one thing I would like to be able to do is those of you who do identify as neurodivergent, I would like to get something from you as far as what you struggle with, so I can explain to you why your brain does that and how you can work around it. Because one of the things you're going to model in your vulnerability is your own resourcefulness, is how you go about handling the gremlins that are your neurodivergent glitches. Now, there's a lot of stuff coming up into the text, but remember, I'm dyslexic. So it's difficult for me to look at it and decode it. So if somebody spots a question there that's like, holy cow, we need to ask this question, somebody just read it out loud.
So somebody
Okay.
said that they struggle with focus. Or like
That reminds me
focusing
of
on
something I
things.
was going to say. Thank you.
Okay.
One thing I discovered is the 2 core needs of anybody with neurodivergence or dysregulated nervous system are calm and focus. Those are the 2 things that we need to accomplish in order to execute. Because when you are not calm, when you are in an anxious state, that pushes you into the realm of fight or flight. And when that happens, physiologically, your prefrontal cortex, where all of that good quality executive function thinking is done, begins to shut down. The blood supply actually reduces and starts to favor your survival instincts. Your emotions run higher, your body changes, your breathing gets much more towards the upper part of your chest and gets faster. You may begin to sweat, everything that goes with being attacked by a grizzly. When maybe it's something that anyone else would consider small. Yeah, but when you have an all or nothing brain, it's rest or panic and some variation of that. So achieving calm, helping them achieve greater calm than they're currently experiencing is necessary. And when you're calm, your executive functions are now back online. And when they're back online, they are less in threat mode and are much better at focusing. Gotta think of some specific ways to do that. Well, one of the ways I demonstrated is I talk about times I was anxious, times I was very emotional, and I talk about how I calm myself down. And give them one thing to do to calm down. Deep diaphragmatic breathing is my go-to. focusing on one of your senses. One thing that I really love, I don't know how many of you have seen this, there's this exercise out there where people will recommend pick 5 things you can see, pick 4 things you can smell, right? Well, if you have very limited working memory and you can only remember a couple things at once, how well are you going to remember that entire process while you're anxious? It's not going to happen. So think of one thing to do. Focus on your breathing. Count to 5 at the end of, count to 1 at the end of every exhalation, up to 10, then repeat. There's like 2 steps there. Or listen to the thing that's farthest away from you. How far away can you hear? What's the closest thing you can hear? You're inviting someone to shift the subject of their attention. Because focus is, bottom line, disciplined attention. When you have a scatterbrain, all or nothing again, your brain says, I need to pay attention to all of it or none of it. Because it's all equally valuable. It's all important. That's why you want to write down every single thought that enters your head, because it's all gold. Right? You creative folks that can't prioritize what I'm going to write about today, what am I going to write about today, or what goal am I going to go after, what book I'm going to read, all of them. Because of the all or nothing. Hannah, does this resonate? A little bit, just a little bit. So understanding that part of their brain or your brain makes you realize that you cannot operationalize all or nothing. You can operationalize a single step. So what step do you want people to take along that continuum? And show them how to take that one step. I have a little acronym that I use that helps remind me not to try and cover everything in a post. Because in my early days, I tried to explain everything and it was a book every single time. And I said so much, I left no room for dialogue. Because I answered all the questions, right? I see some recognition. And I was wondering why nobody was talking to me or nobody was hiring me. Well, because I gave them everything. I gave them the problem, I gave them the solution, I gave them the process, and they didn't need me anymore. So it was in working with people like Des that I learned how to be much more precise about what it is that I shared. That I needed to give enough for them to want to respond, to feel like they have to respond. And one of the ways you do that is if you frame things in an other than all or nothing way to an all or nothing brain, they will feel compelled to correct you. Or if you ask about an experience that is relevant to them, like, hey, when was the last time you felt nervous or you felt like you might be embarrassed? Let me tell you about a time I felt that way. You start with the question to get them to introspect. Because when you are in threat detection all the time, where's your attention? External. And as long as you are on threat alert, you don't spend a lot of time thinking about you and your experiences and how your emotions are showing up or what thoughts are coming into your mind. So asking things that require them to introspect helps them tap into what's actually going on with them at the moment. What is true as opposed to what's the right answer. Because if you ask questions that keep them in their head, they're going to try and tell you what you want to hear. What's the right answer? What am I supposed to say? What's going to make me fit into this conversation? When you ask a personal question, they can answer for themselves because they're not trying to please the crowd. Somebody mentioned over delivery, overriding, over speaking. Yeah, that's because you want to tell somebody everything about the subject they asked you about, as opposed to what simply answered their question. I feel like I've been all over the place. Somebody want to ask something specific? See, prioritizing is a challenge, writing things down. Oh, here's another important reason why writing things down is essential. When you have that scatter in your brain, all of those thoughts going on, all those experiences, and no way to prioritize it, how well are you going to go through a decision-making process when you have that snowstorm going on in your head? Because it's not only the stuff you want to pay attention to, it's also everything else. Does that make sense?
Somebody
It's
asked
like-
about wearing sunglasses, like that they have like light sensitivity. Like you were
Mhm.
asking about questions. Somebody specifically asked about wearing like sunglasses and being affected by like things around them, like being overstimulated, I think is what they meant.
Well, one thing I don't know that I said earlier, but you just reminded me to say it.
Oh, great.
When I asked about who watches the TV with subtitles, that's because for many of us, our visual processing and auditory processing are out of sync. So looking at somebody while they're talking, reading nonverbal cues, facial expressions, hearing their language, a organized brain will kind of see both of those in real time, combine those signals in your brain, and create a cohesive message for you. If they're out of sync, however, you see the facial expressions and everything, but they don't match what you're hearing.
Oh,
So
can I
there's-
just ask, is that why my clients find it easier to walk with me than sit in a room and look at me when I do walk and talk therapy?
They want to walk probably because one, they have anxiety, and two, the walking is bilateral and is rhythmic, and it results in both hemispheres of the brain firing.
Yeah, I
getting
just
better
thought
with each other.
I knew they didn't like to look at me. I knew the motion of walking worked, but I never thought of the discrepancy between looking at me, talking, and hearing me, and processing what's going on at the same time.
In my case, I know the two hemispheres of my brain do not play nicely with each other. In case in point, people tend to have a predominant handedness. They're predominantly left or right. In my case, I write and eat with my left, but everything gross motor like throwing or catching, right hand. Because I have that disparate skill set. My brain isn't sure which side is supposed to do what. So it has that scattered communication, which is one of the reasons I need things concrete. I tend to take things literal. And anybody who's experienced my humor, sorry, Alistair, sees my literal translation of things. And it often comes across as, snarky, sarcastic, but it's just mischievous. It's just me allowing my brain to play, because I know it tends to hear things literally. And sometimes I can turn that into a funny comment, but sometimes it's a misunderstanding where I think that's what the person meant, but they were being much more inferential. Inferential is that reading between the lines kind of thing. When you're very concrete minded, which a lot of neurodivergent folks are, inference doesn't exist.
Oh,
You can't ask me to read between the lines because there's nothing written there. What was that? Somebody was talking?
I have another question on that.
Okay.
When something's, okay. I don't usually say this, so I am saying this as a member of BBS, and I have to ask that it stays here because I'm sharing somebody else's diagnosis and he's not happy with that. But I need to infer that it's a family member who's autistic. And one of the things I realized I had to be careful, and I wanted to ask whether this is in general or whether that's just a quirk between the two of us. But sometimes when we talk about something, he thinks I don't like the thing he's proposing to do. Like he wants to go to his sister's and he thinks I don't like that. Because while I was talking to him about him going to his sister, I was thinking about something else entirely, completely unrelated, that made me feel a bit grumpy. But I was fine with him going. But he caught the undercurrent. So while he can't get inferences, he can feel the energy being off.
Mhm.
Really badly. And
yeah.
I have no idea at that point what I've done wrong, because as far as I was concerned, the conversation we were having was perfectly fine.
one of
And
the
when
blessings,
yeah,
one of the blessings and curses of being neurodivergent is because you have such a high level of hypervigilance or threat detection. When somebody is in an emotional state that could be, that demonstrates they're in feeling threatened as well, annoyed, anxious, frustrated, because we're on threat detection, our empathy is through the roof. Because empathy is about being able to sense someone else's emotional states. Any Spinal Tap fans here? Okay, our threat detection is on 11. So when there are changes in your emotional state, we sense it. We might not always know what it is, but we do know we feel more dis-ease with you. When my wife is anxious and she's pretending everything is fine, and she's a fantastic masker, by the way, I feel like somebody is standing on my chest. And I had to check in with her and ask her. And one night I couldn't sleep because I was sitting there feeling like there was a weight on my chest. And I went to her and I said, whatever's bugging you, you've got to talk about it, because unless you get it out of your system, I won't be able to sleep. And held emotions are worse than expressed emotions. It's the difference between wondering when the top is going to burst or figuring out how I'm going to surf it.
thank
So
you.
I'd much rather tell me you're pissed off than to feel pissed off and not say anything. Oh, rumination. Rumination, preoccupation, obsession. It's when you get stuck on something and you can't budge from it. One of the problems with that, one of the reasons that happens is not only because of the all or nothing, the obsessiveness, but also in order to decrease anxiety and feel less threatened, you need to feel like you are in a position to take action to change your circumstances or to avoid the threat. And one of the reasons we fixate on things is because we can't conceive of any action that we can take to remove that threat. Does that make sense? So all you can do is worry about its presence. So anything that you can offer a person to help them feel less threatened is gold. And it also demonstrates you get it. One thing I started to say earlier, but got distracted, a little acronym that I use to help me focus in on what I want to share with people. And the acronym is TEA. And that stands for thought, emotion, or action. So when I write a post, I ask myself, what part of their experience do I want to impact? Do I want to impact their thinking, their feeling, or what they're doing? And if you try and hit all of those at once, it can be overwhelming. It's too big a shift. It's too much of an upset to their paradigm. But if you invite them to try on a new way of thinking, or you want to add, suggest a metaphor that maybe allows them to loosen up their grip on a limiting belief. You ask them to try this on. Or what if you believed this? A hypothetical, something they can imagine without having to risk taking the action. Hannah?
I was just that's really, really helpful. And it's actually triggered something else in my brain, which is hence where a question's coming from. So I think one of the things that I struggle with sometimes to help my clients who identify as neurodivergent is when they are in that position of hyper fixating on something that is blocking them from moving forward. And because I am a problem solver innately, that all I want to do is fix the problem, you've just triggered in my head that I jump straight to A, whereas actually maybe the conversation needs to start with T and then E and then A. So actually talking to the, would it help from your point of view, sort of if it was you and I that were working together, if I kind of started that conversation with the introspective sort of thinking phase of like, okay, why are we getting, like, let's try and work out why it's there, and then we can work out on how moving forward, because my brain instantly always jumps to, I need to solve this for you because I don't like you feeling upset or anxious or overwhelmed, etc. But I appreciate that sometimes I jump there too quickly, maybe.
Two things to focus on: validating that you get the feeling they're having.
Mm-hmm.
How are you feeling right now? I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling self-conscious. And then you remind them that they are in a position to take action of some kind. So you ask them, well, what if we did something to improve that?
Okay.
Would you consider doing one little thing different? Would you be comfortable with that? Because when someone feels they can take action, they feel less threatened and their anxiety comes down. And now their executive functions come back online. So the quicker you can put them at ease around you, lessen the stress, all of the resourcefulness they need in order to be able to utilize what you're teaching them is now available. They've got to be calm and focused first. If they come to you really, really calm and you say, calm down, it's going to be okay, don't worry about it, there's no process in there. These great ideas, these great outcomes, I have no idea how the hell to get there. Otherwise, that's where I'd be. So helping them move in that direction so they begin to de-escalate a little bit. And you can do something with them called co-regulation, which is you do something deliberate that shows you are calming yourself down. Like you'll take a deep breath. Let's just calm down for a minute, shall we? Let's just relax. Let's just get present. Feel free to do this with me. And literally do it. Feel your brain calm, feel your body sink and rest. Do it, model it. Invite them to try it on. You're not a hypnotist necessarily where you're calling all the shots and they're the only one being hypnotized. It's necessary for you to model for them what it is they can do for themselves. Because often they don't know what the plan is, they don't know how to execute the plan, but you do. So show them, have them do it with you, hold their hand. Because if they feel metaphorically, feel their hand being held, and they allow you that vulnerability, and at the end of it, their vulnerability has not been exploited, but respected, they'll take a chance with you again. They'll be more comfortable with you. It'll be much easier for them to experience calm and focus in your presence.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you, Brian.
You're very welcome. Let's see what else we got here. Now, the question, what do you need right now? A lot of times they don't know what they need, but they do know what the problem is. They know what they don't like. Because they spend so much time on threat detection again, they are focused in where are the dangers. It's all about avoiding the dangers. There are many people I've worked with over the years who I ask them, what do you want? Well, I don't know. You ever thought about what you would like instead of what you're experiencing now? Well, not really. And a lot of that is because they didn't know how to actively go about changing their experience because they were so busy living on defense. They didn't think they really had the option to change their experience. So they never thought to sit down and ask themselves what they wanted or what they needed because they didn't think it was an option. So you may be one of the first people to put that idea in their heads that they do have options. Somebody's apologizing for reframing. Reframing is one of my superpowers for anybody who's ever talked to me. No matter how you make it sound, I'm able to make it more flexible so that you're able to see a way out of it. I also had stage 3 cancer when I was 18, was my graduation present from high school. And I learned a lot about my own resourcefulness through that experience. In fact, the first book I ever wrote was about that experience. And the title of the book, wait for it, what to do when you're totally screwed. Because it was all about when you feel screwed, when you feel helpless, what do you do? And that's what I talk about in that book. And that was about 30 years ago. So that's how long I've been working on this stuff. What about supporting clients who are often stuck in my brain doesn't work properly? Oh yeah, well, my body is not designed to swim across the San Francisco Bay. That's what the bridge is for. I'm going to use that instead. So there are a lot of things my brain doesn't do, period. But that doesn't mean I have to use my brain and only my brain in order to solve those problems. That's where having someone teach you a strategy comes in. That's where using a technical hack comes in. I can't remember my appointments to save my life. So I use Google Calendar with plenty of reminders and different colors so that I can differentiate personal stuff from business stuff, from leisure stuff. Helps me focus on where I need to pay attention at any given time. I use lists in order to remember the things that I have prioritized, the order in which they need to happen, because I could not do that in my head. So it needs to be outside of my head. So using those little hacks, and when people say, I'm stuck, my brain doesn't do that properly, one important question to ask them is, what do you believe your brain needs to be able to do? Because often the expectation is based on some stereotype that doesn't exist. Like, well, people don't have to write things down. They can remember everything. I've heard this from people. I never see anybody writing things down. And I ask them, you ever see them take a shower? No. What does that mean? They don't do it? Well, you can tell by how they smell that they've either bathed in Axe body spray or they've actually cleaned themselves. But chances are they're taking a shower. Chances are they're eating. Chances are they're sleeping, whether you see it or not. So the way to find out for sure who writes stuff down is to ask them. I've actually challenged people who were insistent that because they never saw it, it simply didn't happen. I invited them to go out and ask a couple people. They were blown away by the fact that their assumption was incorrect. Now, hear what I said. I didn't say they were surprised to hear they're wrong. They're wrong is a very personal criticism that they use to devalue themselves. I'll say it's quite possible their assumption was incorrect. An assumption is a way of seeing something. It's something your brain does. It's not part of who you are. It's simply an action. Overwhelm is an experience. It's not reality. It's not who you are. It's something your brain is doing. So if it's something your brain is doing and it's not part of who you are, there's less a threat in changing it. Because if you're trying to invite them to change something that they think is part of who they are, they're going to say, you have to accept me the way I am. I don't have to change myself for anyone. This is who I am. So the way you talk about it differentiates between whether you're talking about them or about an idea or a strategy or an outcome. In fact, the way you bring them into the way you're talking about things is to point out to them, oh, let me clarify. I didn't mean to imply that I meant everyone. In fact, if you look at my comment, I said some people, somebody. Because if they have an all or nothing way of thinking, they only have those two ways to categorize things. So they will take your language that says sometimes or somebody, and they will distort it to make it fit into an all or nothing category. Have you seen people do this to you? You know, sometimes you do this and it upsets me. Oh, it's always me, is it? Why am I always the one that's in trouble? Ever have anybody respond to you that way? Now, that's an all or nothing thinker.
Oh, no, I get that all the time.
Yeah.
We were just working out our marriage after 20 years. For 15 of those, he didn't know he was autistic.
Well, there you go. if that is not a perfect example,
Yeah.
because in
Strangely
his,
found out straight after I trained as a therapist. I now work with neurodivergents only. They keep finding me. I don't advertise.
something you're doing points people in your direction.
I know. I just need to find out what it is.
Well, we need to talk. because as you
I
can,
have other questions, but I won't take the call. So I'm just listening.
because as you can tell from how I've been speaking, I am very strategic and deliberate in how I do things. The way I speak, the words I choose, not so much images because my visual spatial ability is totally whacked. You know, I have a hard time figuring out how things go together in physical space. So don't ask me to put anything together because I don't really see how they necessarily go. It's hard for me to find things in front of me, not because I'm a guy, but because if there are a lot of things in front of me at once, like in a cabinet or on a store shelf, I see all of it and it's one big visual noise and it's difficult for me to sort it all out. To find the thing that you want me to get for you. Be right in front of my face and I'll miss it. Because I see the forest, not the trees. Hannah?
So I'm trying to think of how I can help people a bit more with, so I've already started to create things like checklists and stuff. And you've given me some great points on including the how, not just the what, because I have a tendency to forget that not everyone knows what I'm talking about sometimes. So I appreciate that a lot. From a layout point of view, is there any kind of tips? Because with you saying that maybe that sort of visual, that if there's too much on one page or there's too much in front of you, are there any tips or anything that you could give me and everyone else on
Absolutely.
like how to put things down on paper to make it as easy as possible for people to process that information?
One thing to find out about people is what do they do in their leisure time? I like to read. Now, I don't read with my eyes, I read with my ears. I do audiobooks or I do text to speech. So that tells you that I need stuff spelled out in an auditory way so I can take it in through my ears. Checklists I can listen to. They're very, very organized. Some people who are much more visual, they will benefit from images or video that goes along with the checklist. If somebody is much more kinesthetic, they like to go for long walks. They like to hike. It's going to be important for those people to have something to do as part of what you're offering them. Does that make sense? And just by asking, what do you do to relax? What do you do when you're not working?
Okay.
I like to watch movies. You know, I like to watch TikTok. Okay, I need to give you a lot of visuals.
Mhm.
Do you do better with shorter videos or longer videos? Because there are people that do really long videos and they're the ones that do the quick snippets. Quick snippets are great if for no other reason than it takes into consideration someone's attention span, because focusing when you are not calm takes a lot of effort. It's like holding on to like a heavy dumbbell. The longer you're holding on to it, the weaker your arm gets until you have to finally drop it. And that's when you see someone space out. Their brain literally has to let go of focusing because it's too much effort. So the shorter they have to hang in there, the more likely they are to take it in and remember it. So if you're going to do a short video, define the problem, the solution, and one action step that's going to move them closer to it.
I like that.
And that's all you need to give them.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Now, I know we're coming up on the hour, and I know that I want to respect everybody's time here. One thing I've been kind of kicking around for a while is creating a beta kind of membership group for people that are not only neurodivergent, who are entrepreneurs like yourselves, but also people that are working with neurodivergence and want to connect with them more effectively. So we can start up that way. Very reasonably priced since it's a beta, okay? and everybody would be helping me create the content, but just based on what I'm hearing here, there's a lot that could be done. So if anybody's interested in helping me get that out of the gate, just message me and we'll see what we can do.
Isn't your membership also for neurodivergent? Well, I guess it's not for entrepreneurs, or is it?
The one that I have now is for women that are neurodivergent and or have kids that are neurodivergent. So I focus on it from much more of a family relationship oriented kind of thing, but clearly that also extends into the realm of business. It just really depends on what kind of outcomes you want for the people you're trying to relate with. And of course, it gets all into social media hacks and tactics and that kind of stuff, which my regular group doesn't.
Because I'm sure that some people here might be interested in working with you in any way possible. So if that's the case, guys, just reach out to Brian. Obviously, you're all in BBS. It's a safe space. He's not going to be like pitching you in your DMs. He's just there if you want to have a chat about how to work with him further on this, because, you know, whether you're neurodivergent or you have clients who are neurodivergent, I mean, we weren't born with a clue. Like, I was completely clueless pretty much before I met Brian on how to handle this. I didn't even know the term neurodivergent until I met Brian, funnily enough, a couple of years ago. And now, for some reason, this community is full of incredible neurodivergent humans, as you saw in the chat. About half of you, if not more, said yes, 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 me. So I guess he's helped me do something right, which I'm very grateful for.
And one of the biggest things, most important things for you to do for yourselves is to learn how to be more at ease, more accepting and more at peace with your own neurodivergence. Because in the absence of that, you're going to have your own defenses and your own barriers to have to work through in order to put yourself out there and be effective with people. So helping you be comfortable in your own skin as someone with neurodivergence is a core part of what I teach. So if that's something that's important to you as a professional, then by all means, we should probably have a conversation. So you get to heal and learn to manage your own neurodivergence while simultaneously know how to connect, reach somebody in their experience, create a shared experience so they see that you get it. And then that makes you far safer and more attractive to do business with. So I know we could easily talk for 2 more hours about this, and there's already a lot to chew on. So we can probably close it out at this point, and anybody else who wants to talk more about it, we can talk more about it.
And remember, you can also do a BBS 20 with Brian and each other. And I want to encourage you guys, because many people here have memberships, or if not a membership, then a podcast. And if not a podcast, then a free group. Whatever you have, if you feel like what just happened here would be valuable for your community as well, just reach out to Brian and bring him in as a guest expert. Because, you know, I feel like there aren't enough people talking about this right now. So not only will it be bonus points for you for actually caring to bring someone like Brian to your community, but as he said, it will make you more attractive from a business standpoint as well.
Somebody that said I can't do business the modern way, guess what? You don't have to.
Yeah.
You can absolutely do things according to your needs and not apologize for doing it that way.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, this is the third now training for our brand new category in the dashboard. Hopefully everybody at this point has seen the new dashboard from February. So you will find this in the category called Being a True Leader, because I believe that this and the other 2 trainings in there that we had are pretty much determinant, I don't know what the word is, of how good of a leader somebody is. Because if you don't care about neurodivergent people in 2022, are you even a leader? I had to ask myself that question last year, and that's how this came about. Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you. I hope this has been helpful, everybody.
It was okay.
A little bit, help me kill some time before I have to go get my root canal.
I'm gonna use that.
That's just one of the playful things my brain does, a little self-deprecation.
Um, by the way, guys, go and tag Brian on your wall and leave him a little testimonial or your wall or his wall if you enjoyed this and found it valuable. Okay.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
And I will see many of you for the Get Unstuck call tomorrow. Please come with your one main issue that's holding you back. And please, I do not want to see you on that call if you're doing great and you are not stuck in any way. I will legitimately just kick you out. Like you have all the regular, yes, Hannah, we have all the regular mastermind calls for people who are doing great. But for those who are feeling stuck in any way, the Get Unstuck call will do what it says in the title for you. You know I'm not creative when it comes to naming things. So I'll see many of you guys tomorrow. This recording will be up probably by tonight in the Being a True Leader category. I recommend that you rewatch it 5 million times. And Brian, we appreciate you so much, my friend.
Likewise.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.